September 23, 1935, 10:47 p.m. Small's Paradise, 2294 7th Avenue. 12 men walk through the door. All armed, all there for one man. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sits alone at table 7, nursing bourbon, his back to the wall, his eyes on the mirror. The mirror shows him everything. Dutch Schultz enforcers fan out. 6 toward the bar, 4 blocking exits, 2 moving straight for Bumpy. The entire club goes silent. 83 people freeze mid-conversation. The band stops playing. Even the cigarette smoke seems to hang motionless in the amber light. Every soul in that room knows what 12 armed men means. This is an execution, not a negotiation, not a warning. Bumpy doesn't move, doesn't reach for his gun, doesn't even turn around. He takes another sip, then he smiles. The kind of smile that says, "Has been waiting for this." The kind that makes you wonder who's really trapped. By 11:32 p.m., 11 bodies would be carried out. 1 man would walk, and the message he delivered to Dutch Schultz would change Harlem forever. 3 weeks earlier, Harlem was a powder keg wrapped in silk and jazz. Bumpy Johnson wasn't just another gangster. He was Harlem's protector, its strategist, its conscience in a 3-piece suit. While other crime bosses ruled through fear, Bumpy ruled through respect. He paid for funerals, funded schools, protected local businesses from white mob extortion. The streets called him the professor because he could quote Shakespeare as easily as he could break your arm. He controlled the numbers racket from 110th Street to 155th. Every runner, every policy bank, every underground operation answered to him. But he had one rule: Harlem money stayed in Harlem. September 1935 was a turning point. Prohibition had just ended. The old revenue streams were drying up. Downtown mobsters were hungry. The Italian families controlled Lower Manhattan. The Irish had Hell's Kitchen. But Harlem, Black Harlem, that was untapped gold. 500,000 residents, millions in. Gambling revenue flowing weekly. Policy wheels spinning 24 hours a day. The Apollo Theater pulling crowds every night. The Cotton Club minting money. And every white mobster in New York wanted a piece. The question wasn't if someone would make a move. The question was who would be foolish enough to try first. Arthur Dutch Schultz Flegenheimer was that fool. Born in the Bronx, raised in poverty, forged in violence. The man had built an empire on beer, bootlegging, and brutality. His organization controlled the Bronx, parts of Manhattan, and New Jersey. His personal fortune estimated at $20 million. His body count, nobody kept track anymore. They called him the Dutchman, and when people said his name, they whispered it. Head once beat a man to death with a tire iron for shorting him $50. Head bombed rival speakeasies with families inside. Head corrupted half the police force and terrorized the other half. Now he wanted Harlem's numbers game, not a percentage, not a partnership, all of it. His calculation was simple. Harlem's weekly gambling revenue topped $200,000. That was $10 million a year. Money currently flowing to a black gangster with no major mob backing. In Dutch's mind, Bumpy was a street tough playing king, an obstacle to remove. Dutch had sent word through intermediaries. Sell me the operation, $50,000. Walk away. Bumpy's response came back in 48 hours. Harlem Iacent for sale. Not for $50,000, not for $50 million. Tell Mr. Schultz Hess welcome to visit. Alone. That response cost Bumpy everything Dutch could muster. The Dutchman assembled his most vicious crew. Vincent Mad Dog calls former men. Killers would survive the Castellammares War. Enforcers would machine-gun the competition into submission. 12 men, 48 hours of surveillance on Bumpy's movements. One target, Small's Paradise, where Bumpy held court every Monday night. Dutch's final words to his crew: make it public. Make it brutal. I want every black gangster in Harlem to know what happens when they tell me no. Dutch Schultz's plan was textbook mob warfare. Small's Paradise was the perfect killing ground. One main entrance, 2 service exits, open floor plan. Monday nights drew smaller crowds, easier to control, fewer witnesses to manage. The plan: 6 men enter first, blend with the crowd, order drinks. Wait for Bumpy to arrive at his usual table. Then the hit squad enters. Block the exits. Converge on table 7. 15 seconds of gunfire. Walk out before Harlem's police, already on Dutch's payroll, even responded. Inside Small's Paradise, the air was thick with smoke and saxophone. The walls were painted deep red, the lighting amber and low. 90-degree heat outside, but the club stayed cool, packed with 83 people. Women in silk dresses, men in sharp suits. The band played Duke Ellington. Waiters balanced trays of gin and whiskey. Laughter mixed with trumpet notes. At the bar, a gambler named Percy celebrated a policy win. At table 3, a dancer from the Cotton Club sipped champagne with her mother. Table 7 sat empty, waiting. At 10:31 p.m., 6 of Dutch's men entered. They took positions. 2 at the bar ordering rye, 2 at table 12 near the kitchen exit, 2 standing near the coat check, smoking cigarettes, watching the door. They wore dark suits, fedoras pulled low, hands in pockets. At 10:40 p.m., Bumpy Johnson walked through the door, alone. Navy blue suit, gold watch chain, hat tilted just slightly. He nodded to the owner, Charlie Small, who owned the club. He waved to familiar faces. He sat at table 7, ordered 4 Roses bourbon, neat. His back to the mahogany-paneled wall, his eyes on the mirror running the length of the bar. The mirror showed him every face, every hand, every door. At 10:47 p.m., the main door opened again. 12 men entered, not 6, 12. They didn't try to blend. They spread out like wolves. Conversations died. The saxophone. Player hit a wrong note, stopped. The bartender's hand froze mid-pour. Women grabbed their purses. Men calculated distances to doors. Everyone recognized what this was. Dutch's lead enforcer, a man named Eddie the Fixer Langen, moved toward table 7, his right hand inside his jacket, his men behind him, forming a semicircle, blocking sight lines, trapping Bumpy against the wall. The room held its breath. 83 people, 1 target, 12 guns. At 10:48, Eddie was 15 feet from Bumpy. At 10:49, 10 feet. The temperature dropped. Someone's glass slipped, shattered. At 10:50, Eddie was 5 feet away, his hand emerging from his jacket, chrome glinting. Bumpy still hadn't moved, still held his bourbon glass, still faced the mirror, not the threat. Then Eddie stopped, because he finally saw what Bumpy was looking at in that mirror. Behind Eddie and his crew, the 6 men who had entered First Dutch's advance team were no longer sitting. They were standing, guns drawn, aimed not at Bumpy, but at Eddie, at the 12 men who thought they were the hunters. The 6 men at the bar weren't Dutch's men at all. What Eddie Langen didn't know was that Bumpy Johnson had owned Small's Paradise's information network for 3 years. Every waiter, every bartender, every coat check girl, they all reported to Bumpy. When Dutch's men had spent 48 hours watching Bumpy's movements, Bumpy's people had spent 72 hours watching Dutch's men watching Bumpy. He knew about the plan before Dutch's crew had even chosen their weapons. He knew they'd picked Monday night. He knew they'd use Small's Paradise. He knew Eddie would lead them. He knew everything. On September 20th, 3 days before the hit, Bumpy had met with Charlie Small, the club's owner. They'd worked together since 1932. Charlie owed Bumpy his life. Bumpy had stopped Irish mobsters from burning down the club in '33. That night they'd made a simple plan. When Dutch's advance team entered on Monday, Charlie would seat them at specific tables. Bumpy's men's six-shooters from his inner circle, including William Bub Hewlett and Junie Bird, would enter 90 seconds later, take positions that looked casual but created a crossfire. They'd let Dutch's kill squad enter, let them commit, let them spread out and expose themselves. On September 22nd, Bumpy had sent word to Dutch Schultz through a corrupt NYPD captain. The message: "Tell Dutch I'll be at Small's Paradise tomorrow night. Alone, table 7, 10:30 p.m. If he wants Harlem, come take it." Now, at 10:51 p.m., the trap snapped shut. Bumpy finally turned around, looked Eddie Langan in the eyes, set his bourbon glass down on table 7 with a soft click that sounded like thunder in the silence. He stood slowly, buttoned his suit jacket, and spoke, his voice carrying across the frozen room. "You came into my home, threatened my people, because your boss thinks money can buy what respect couldn't earn. But you made one mistake, Eddie. You believed Dutch Schultz was smarter than me." Bumpy reached into his jacket. Eddie flinched, but Bumpy pulled out a playing card, the ace of spades. He placed it on the table. 12 men, 12 bullets in that card back in my office. I knew your names before you knew the assignment. I knew your plan before you loaded your guns. Now you know mine. He nodded once. 6 hammers clicked behind Dutch's crew. Your choice, Eddie, walk out that door and deliver a message to Dutch, or stay here and become one. Eddie Langan looked at his men, looked at the 6 guns aimed at their backs, looked at Bumpy Johnson, who stood there like a man playing chess while everyone else played checkers, and Eddie dropped his gun. At 10:53 p.m., Eddie Langan walked toward the door. His 11 men didn't. They reached for their weapons, thought they could shoot their way out, thought 12 guns beat 6. They were wrong. Bumpy's crew didn't miss. The gunfire lasted 8 seconds, sounded like the world ending. When the smoke cleared, 11 bodies lay on Smalls' Paradise floor, blood pooling on polished wood, brass casings rolling across tiles. The band members were under their instruments. Patrons were under tables. Charlie Small had disappeared into his office. Bumpy Johnson stood exactly where he'd been standing, suit still immaculate. Eddie Langan stood at the door unharmed. Shaking, Bumpy walked over to him, handed him the ace of spades. "Give this to Dutch. Tell him Harlem has a king. Tell him kings don't negotiate with invaders. Tell him if he ever sends men to my streets again, I won't send one back." Eddie ran, literally ran down 7th Avenue into the September night. By midnight, he was sitting across from Dutch Schultz in a Bronx warehouse, stuttering through the story. Dutch's face went purple, then white. He threw a bottle against the wall, screamed for 20 minutes. But he never sent men to Harlem again, because Head just learned what everyone in Harlem already knew. Bumpy Johnson didn't just control the streets. He controlled the information, the loyalty, the game. Within a week, word had spread through New York's underworld. Lucky Luciano himself sent a message of respect. The Italian families backed off Harlem expansion plans. Dutch Schultz, who had terrorized the Bronx and Manhattan, had been outplayed by a black gangster with no army, no mob backing, just intelligence and strategy. Small's Paradise reopened the next night. The bullet holes remained in the walls for years. People called them the Dutchman's mistakes. Bumpy's legend wasn't just cemented. It was cast in gold. September 23, 1935, became a dividing line in organized crime history. Before that night, white mobsters viewed Harlem as territory waiting to be conquered. After that night, they viewed it as a kingdom with a king worth respecting. Bumpy Johnson proved that power wasn't about firepower. It was about intelligence, preparation, and understanding that real control comes from the people, not from fear. While Dutch Schultz died in a Newark chop house a month later, shot by other mobsters, Bumpy Johnson ruled Harlem for 3 more decades. What made Bumpy different wasn't his violence. It was his vision. He understood that 12 men with guns lose to 6 men with information every time. He knew that loyalty bought through respect outlasts loyalty bought through fear. He played chess while everyone else played checkers. He saw 3 moves ahead when his enemies couldn't see past the next punch. The lesson isn't about crime. It's about strategy. Real power doesn't come from the loudest voice or the biggest gun. It comes from knowing more, planning better, and never letting your enemy see you sweat. Bumpy Johnson sat at table 7 with 12 killers coming for him and never spilled his bourbon. That's not luck. That's mastery. If this story showed you why Bumpy Johnson was the most dangerous mind in New York, hit subscribe, drop a like if you respect the code. Comment below, would you have walked out like Eddie or stayed with the crew? Next week, the night Frank Costello tried to buy Bumpy Johnson and learned some men can't be bought. You won't believe what Bumpy did with Costello's $1 million offer.